Chloe continued what she wanted to say while Mia and Brooke listened intently. Why did simply hearing his name provoke such a strong reaction? It wasn't the anger that Chloe couldn't understand. It was why the anger seemed to exist at all. It was the strangest thing, Chloe said after a long pause. Mia and Brooke looked at her. A few months later, one of Noah's neighbors called Tate's landline and left a voicemail. Brooke frowned. A neighbor. Chloe nodded. He said there had been a prowler going in and out of Noah's house. She looked down at her tea. But the more he described it, the stranger it became. How so? Mia asked. The neighbor said whoever it was knew Noah's alarm code. They disarmed the security system. Chloe continued. And according to him, the security cameras had been disabled. Brooke's expression grew serious. That doesn't sound like a random burglar. That's exactly what I thought. Chloe nodded. The neighbor kept saying it looked like someone who knew the house. She swallowed. And then he mentioned something that has always stayed with me. What? Brooke asked. Chloe gave a bewildered laugh. He said the prowler would open Noah's refrigerator. She paused. And help themselves to something to drink. Silence settled over the table. Mia frowned. That's oddly comfortable for a burglar. Exactly. Chloe nodded. The neighbor said it didn't look like someone breaking into a stranger's home. She looked from Mia to Brooke. It looked like someone walking through a house they already knew. The three women sat quietly, each wondering the same thing. If the neighbor's story was accurate, whoever had been entering Noah's house hadn't behaved like an intruder at all. Chloe's eyes widened slightly as another memory surfaced. And then I remembered something. Mia and Brooke looked at her. Tate was the one who installed Noah's security system. The two women exchanged a glance. He set up the cameras himself. Chloe swallowed. He programmed the recorder. He chose where everything was installed. She looked down at the table. He knew the alarm code. Neither Mia nor Brooke said a word. He also knew where the security room was. Her voice had become quieter. He knew where the recordings were stored. Brooke leaned back in her chair. So, she let the thought trail off. Chloe slowly nodded. The neighbor said the person disabled the cameras. She paused. And hearing that, she looked between her friends. I realized that whoever entered the house knew exactly how the security system worked. Mia spoke carefully. That certainly narrows the possibilities to someone familiar with the system. Chloe nodded. It made me wonder whether the person had been there before, or whether Noah had shared access with someone he trusted. She sighed. I still don't know who it was. Brooke rested a hand on Chloe's arm. Without evidence, it could be any number of people who knew the house. I know, Chloe replied, I've never found out. She looked back into her tea. But every time I remember that voicemail, I also remember that Tate knew every detail of Noah's security system. Does he make you happy? Mia asked. I know we talked about this a few months after you got married, but it's been over a year now. Has Tate actually become a better husband? Chloe nodded with a small smile. He's changed a lot. In what way? He makes our marriage a priority now. He plans dates, makes time for just the two of us, and we actually talk instead of living separate lives under the same roof. He brings me flowers for no reason, and sometimes we host parties together. We're finding ways to connect as best as Tate can. Well, I'm glad he's making you happy, Brooke said with a smile. Because honestly, those first 6 months of your marriage, I thought the horse was dying and limping toward water. Mia burst into laughter. Brooke laughed too, then noticed Chloe staring at her with a completely straight face. The laughter died in her throat. You didn't think that was funny, did you? Chloe folded her arms. No. There was an awkward silence. Mia cleared her throat. Wait, was Chloe the horse or was Tate? The horse was me, Brooke admitted, trying not to laugh again. Chloe blinked. Why were you the horse? Because every time you two walked into a room together, I thought, this marriage isn't going to survive the year. Watching you two was emotionally exhausting. I felt like I was the one limping toward water. Even Chloe couldn't help letting out a reluctant smile. You know, she said, shaking her head, that's still a terrible analogy. I never said it was a good analogy, Brooke replied with a grin, just an accurate one. As long as he's making you happy, Mia said with a warm smile, then I'm happy for you. I honestly never thought Tate Blue was capable of making anyone happy, and judging by what people have said over the years, that's a pretty common opinion. I heard, Brooke interrupted, that there were all kinds of rumors about Tate and Noah when they were growing up in the late 70s and early 80s. Chloe looked up. Rumors. Brooke nodded. People used to say they were inseparable, closer than most boys were expected to be back then. They were always together and people noticed. They noticed, Mia added, because people always think they know what's going on in someone else's life. Small towns thrive on gossip. Chloe sighed. I've heard some of those stories. Most of them leave out the parts that actually mattered. They usually do, Brooke said. Rumors rarely tell the whole truth. What kinds of rumors? Chloe asked, lifting her teacup and taking a sip. Brooke hesitated for a moment, looking almost reluctant to answer. I've been to a few parties with women who used to hook up with Tate, she said. Madison especially had some pretty risque stories. Chloe raised an eyebrow but didn't interrupt. They all described him the same way. Tate had a reputation for sleeping around. Playboy doesn't even seem like the right word, Brooke shrugged. A man-whore, I guess, if we're being blunt. Mia snorted into her tea. But that was the strange part, Brooke continued. For someone who was with so many people, everyone said he was emotionally distant. He never let anyone get close. It was like there was a wall around him that nobody could get through. Chloe rested her cup on its saucer. That, she said quietly, sounds exactly like the Tate I know. Has Tate ever been in love? Brooke asked. Mia let out a small laugh. That cold, emotionless bastard? I seriously doubt it. The only emotions I've ever seen him show are anger, jealousy, and that permanent scowl he seems to wear. Chloe smiled faintly. He's different in private. Both women looked at her. He does have sensitive moments, Chloe admitted, especially when it's just the two of us. He lets his guard down more than people realize. But Brooke asked. Chloe hesitated before smiling to herself. And he gets strangely sentimental whenever Noah comes up. Mia blinked. Sentimental. Chloe nodded. It's subtle, but it's there. Sometimes he'll start reminiscing about something from years ago without even realizing he's doing it. Brooke leaned forward. I thought you just said he wasn't emotional. He isn't, Chloe replied. Not openly, but Noah has always been the exception to a lot of Tate's rules. Mia grinned. So the stone statue actually has a crack in it. Chloe laughed softly. Oh, definitely, mention Noah and sooner or later Tate will react. Sometimes he'll get nostalgic, sometimes jealous, sometimes he'll literally stomp his foot because he's frustrated with himself for caring so much. Brooke burst into laughter. Tate Blue stomping his foot, now that I'd pay to see. It happened, Chloe said with a smile, once. So Tate becomes sentimental, Mia said with a grin. The cold-hearted asshole actually has a soft spot. Chloe smiled. He does. And that soft spot just happens to have blonde hair and blue eyes, Mia teased. Well, that's unexpectedly sweet. Brooke laughed. Just wait, Mia continued. There was all kinds of interesting gossip floating around a few years ago. People loved talking about Tate and Noah. What kind of gossip? Chloe asked. They'd sit shoulder to shoulder, fall asleep leaning against each other, or one of them would be sitting while the other practically ended up in his lap. They were unusually affectionate for two boys, at least by the standards people had back then. Brooke nodded. I remember hearing Uncle Tim talk about it. He'd say Tate acted queer or something along those lines. That was the language some people used in those days. She shrugged. I never actually saw anything that proved any of the rumors. What I did see was that Tate and Noah were incredibly close and comfortable around each other physically. In Lowe's Angels, especially in those circles, that kind of friendship made a lot of people uncomfortable. People filled in the blanks with gossip. Chloe stirred her tea. Sometimes people mistake closeness for something they already expect to see, she said quietly. Rumors tend to say more about the people spreading them than the people they're about. Brooke giggled. I heard from several reliable sources that Tate and Noah shared a bed for 22 years. She shook her head, still smiling. Can you imagine 26-year-old men still sleeping in the same bed? Chloe's eyebrows rose. I don't see the problem. They're platonic friends or buddies or whatever they want to call themselves. So what if they slept in the same queen-size bed? Brooke snorted. Queen size, she laughed. It wasn't a queen. Chloe frowned. It was a twin. There was a beat of silence before Mia burst into laughter. A twin, she repeated. You're telling me two grown men voluntarily squeezed into a twin bed for years? That's what I was told, Brooke said. Apparently neither of them thought it was unusual. Chloe shrugged and took another sip of her tea. If it worked for them, I don't see why everyone else was so fascinated by it. Because, Brooke replied with a grin, most people can barely imagine one adult fitting comfortably in a twin bed, let alone two. Why didn't they sleep in a bigger bed? Chloe asked. Surely that couldn't have been comfortable. Brooke opened her mouth, then hesitated, looking like she was debating whether to say it. Oh, come on, Mia said, grinning. Don't stop now, tell us before you burst. Brooke laughed. All right, from what I was told, they didn't exactly share the bed in the usual way. Chloe tilted her head. What do you mean? I heard Tate would fall asleep lying on top of Noah. Noah would be flat on his back and Tate would just stretch out across his stomach like it was the most natural thing in the world. For a moment no one spoke. Mia blinked. So, basically two bales of hay stacked on top of each other. Brooke burst into laughter. That's one way to picture it. Mia shook her head, smiling. I've never heard of anything so oddly sweet. She paused before adding, no wonder people talked. Brooke shrugged. Back then, people saw two men who were unusually affectionate and physically comfortable with each other, and they immediately started making assumptions. Chloe smiled into her tea. Or maybe they were just two people who felt safe around each other and didn't care what anyone else thought. Brooke nodded. Maybe, either way, they certainly gave the rumor mill plenty to work with. Mia leaned back in her chair. I've heard my share of rumors too. People always seem to have another story to tell about Tate and Noah. Brooke nodded. Like what? They were so close that teachers and students in junior high and high school didn't know what to make of them. They were constantly together, defended each other, and ignored the usual social expectations. Because of that, people started labeling them. Chloe frowned. That's awful. It was, Mia agreed. Some teachers and plenty of students assumed they must be gay simply because they were unusually close friends. They were teased, bullied, and whispered about for years. Back then, two boys showing that level of loyalty and physical closeness made a lot of people uncomfortable. Brooke sighed. And none of the gossip was ever backed up by evidence. Exactly, Mia said. As adults, people still repeated stories about them sharing a bed for years, but there was never any evidence that Tate and Noah were ever romantically or sexually involved. That never stopped the rumor mill. Once people decide they've figured someone out, they tend to ignore the facts. Chloe shook her head. It's strange how people can invent an entire relationship just because two buddies refuse to fit everyone else's expectations. Mia nodded. That's gossip for you. Sometimes it says far more about the people spreading it than the people they're talking about. Do you ever wonder if the rumors were true? Mia asked thoughtfully. Not necessarily that they were ever a couple, but whether somewhere along the way as adults, after a few too many drinks or during one of those late nights when they were alone, they crossed a line once, and then got embarrassed, agreed it was a mistake, and never spoke about it again. Brooke shrugged. I've wondered. I think everyone who knew them probably has at some point. Chloe shook her head. I don't. If something like that had happened, I think one of them would have carried it differently. From everything I've seen, they were simply closer than most friends. People couldn't understand it, so they kept trying to force it into a category that made sense to them. Mia smiled. Maybe you're right. Gossip has a way of filling in the blanks whenever people don't understand a relationship. Brooke nodded. And with Tate and Noah, there were always more blanks than answers. Don't you find it strange? Brooke asked Chloe. Tate lived 26 years without ever having a serious girlfriend. He didn't date, he never seemed to fall in love, and then he meets you. After your relationship took off, he dumps you, then marries, then days later. She shook her head. A wealthy, good-looking guy like Tate? You'd think he would have been in love at least once before then. It's hard for me to believe he went 26 years without ever falling for someone. Mia nodded in agreement. Maybe, she said, but I actually don't think it's possible. Brooke looked at her skeptically. Why? Because if Tate had ever truly been in love, Noah would have known, Mia shrugged. No one spent more time with Tate than Noah did. They lived together, slept in the same room for years, traveled together, and were around each other constantly. If there had been someone who genuinely captured Tate's heart, I'd have a hard time believing Noah would have missed it. Chloe considered that for a moment. Unless Tate was so private that he never let anyone see that side of him. That's possible, Mia admitted. But from everything I've ever heard, there simply wasn't anyone. Plenty of rumors, plenty of gossip, but no lasting relationship, no broken engagement, no great romance, just Tate. Brooke smiled. Which makes you the first woman anyone can point to and say, that's the one he chose. Chloe looked down at her teacup, a faint smile forming. Maybe he just wasn't ready until he met the right person. Neither Brooke nor Mia argued. It was as reasonable an explanation as any. Why do you think they never went beyond being buddies? Mia asked. Noah is cute and sweet and Tate looks like some kind of sex god. Why didn't they ever get together? Chloe shrugged. Maybe because they simply didn't feel that way about each other. Brooke wasn't convinced. I don't know, she leaned back in her chair. The whole thing just seems fishy to me. Fishy, Chloe repeated. Yeah, think about it. Two attractive guys who spent practically every waking hour together, slept in the same room for years, shared a bed, grew up under the same roof, were closer than most siblings or best friends ever are. And absolutely nothing happened. That's what I'm saying feels fishy. Mia nodded slowly. I can see why people wondered. I'm not saying the rumors were true, Brooke clarified. I'm saying I understand why people couldn't stop talking. From the outside, their friendship didn't fit into the neat little boxes everyone expects. Most people would have assumed something romantic was going on. Chloe smiled faintly. Or maybe that's exactly the problem. People saw two people who loved each other deeply as friends and decided friendship couldn't possibly explain it. Brooke shrugged. Maybe, but I'll admit it still strikes me as unusual. Most people would have expected something to happen eventually. The fact that, as far as anyone knows, nothing ever did, that's the part that feels fishy. It's almost too unbelievable, which is probably why the gossip lasted for so many years. Chloe lifted her teacup. Sometimes the truth is less dramatic than rumors. And sometimes, Mia said with a grin, people just can't accept that the simplest answer might actually be the right one. Brooke giggled. Can you imagine how lucky Noah was, even if it was completely platonic? Mia laughed. Go on. I'm serious, Brooke said. Imagine having that ridiculously handsome sex god nakedly draped across you every night. Tate looked like he belonged on the cover of a magazine. Half the women in Lowe's Angels would have traded places with Noah in a heartbeat. Chloe rolled her eyes, smiling. You make it sound like Noah won the lottery. Brooke pointed at her. I'm saying he had a front row seat to the city's most unattainable bachelor. Every night he had this rugged, unbelievably attractive stud curled up on him, his cock resting against Noah's thigh like it was the most normal thing in the world. And Noah apparently didn't think twice about it. Exactly, Brooke said. Meanwhile, everyone else was standing on the outside wondering how two people could be that physically comfortable with each other and insist they were just buddies. Chloe chuckled. Knowing Noah, he probably got used to it after a while. Brooke shook her head in disbelief. I still think the blonde was incredibly lucky. Platonic or not, most people would have been flustered having someone who looked like Tate falling asleep on them every night. Chloe smiled. Or maybe Noah stopped seeing the handsome face years earlier. When you've known someone since childhood, sometimes they're just your person, not a fantasy. Do you ever wonder, Brooke said with a mischievous grin, if after all those years of sharing a bed, they ever woke up in some ridiculously awkward position and had no idea how they ended up like that? The girls giggled. I mean, think about it, Brooke continued. 22 years is a long time. They had to have accidentally invaded each other's personal space at some point while they were asleep. Mia laughed. That would have been an interesting conversation to wake up to. Brooke shrugged dramatically. And sometimes I wonder if they secretly enjoyed confusing everyone. They knew people were constantly gossiping about them. Maybe they thought it was funny. You think they'd play into the rumors? Chloe asked. Maybe, Brooke replied. Imagine everyone whispering behind their backs, and instead of getting upset, they'd deliberately act even more comfortable around each other in public just to watch the rumor mill explode. Mia laughed into her tea. That actually sounds like something Tate would do. Brooke nodded enthusiastically. I'm not saying they were secretly in love. I'm saying I could picture them realizing people had already made up their minds, so they stopped caring, or maybe even found the gossip entertaining. The more everyone tried to label them, the more they simply acted like themselves. Chloe smiled over the rim of her teacup. Whatever they were, they certainly kept people talking. And apparently, Brooke said with another laugh, they still do. Chloe finished the last sip of her tea and set the delicate cup onto its saucer. Well, she said, pushing back her chair, I'd better get going. I have an appointment with Talia this afternoon. We're discussing another charity gala for the Children's Hospital. Brooke smiled. The Blues certainly know how to put their name on a good cause. Chloe laughed. Talia says if the family's name is going to be in the headlines, she'd rather it be because they helped someone than because of another ridiculous rumor. I can't argue with that, Mia said as she stood. The pediatric wing has helped a lot of families. Chloe nodded. That's exactly why she wants to keep supporting it. The three women gathered their purses and walked toward the front door. Brooke's smile softened. Poor Noah, she said quietly. He had to spend a few days in one of the Blue Hospital wings not that long ago, poor guy. I heard about that, Mia replied. Thankfully he recovered. He did, Chloe said. Talia made sure he had the best care available. She's always had a soft spot for him. Brooke smiled. I'm glad he's all right. He's been through enough over the years. Chloe nodded in agreement. He has. For a brief moment, the conversation grew quiet. Then the three women stepped outside, leaving the gossip behind as they went their separate ways. Sunday night's family dinner was already underway as relatives filtered into the mansion one by one. Tate arrived exactly on time. That alone earned him a few curious glances. Punctuality had never exactly been one of Tate Blue's defining traits. Without saying much, he took his usual seat at the long dining room table. A moment later, the front door opened again. Everyone looked up. Chloe stepped inside. Behind her was Tate. For a split second, the dining room fell completely silent. There were two Tates. The man already seated at the table looked up without the slightest hint of surprise. The newcomer offered the family a polite smile as if nothing about the situation was unusual. Brooke blinked twice. Am I seeing double? A few relatives exchanged confused looks. The Tate who had been sitting at the table rose to his feet. I'll be right back, he said casually, heading toward the downstairs bathroom. As he disappeared around the corner, Chloe walked over and settled into the chair beside the now empty place setting. She smiled to herself. Thank you for saving me a seat, dear. Several family members stared between the hallway where Tate had disappeared and the identical man still standing near the front entrance. No one spoke. The room had suddenly become far more interesting than Sunday dinner. A few minutes later, Tate returned from the downstairs bathroom, drying his hands on a hand towel. He stopped dead in the doorway. His seat was occupied. His twin was comfortably settled beside Chloe, and Chloe had an affectionate arm wrapped around him as they chatted as though nothing in the world was out of the ordinary. The entire table was watching, waiting to see what Tate would do. With an exasperated sigh, the real Tate walked over and lightly tapped his twin on the shoulder. Do you enjoy riling me up, he asked flatly, or do you make a point of doing it on purpose? Chloe looked up with a warm smile. Oh, you're both. She froze. Her eyes darted from the man beside her to the one standing over him. A horrified scream escaped her. Ah, not again. She practically threw herself backward, yanking her arm off the fake Tate as though she'd touched a live wire. That is so creepy. The dining room erupted in laughter. The twin couldn't help but grin. I thought I had her fooled for at least another minute. You did, Brooke said between laughs. The real Tate pinched the bridge of his nose. I leave for 5 minutes. You left for 3, his twin corrected. Felt like 5. Chloe pressed a hand against her racing heart. I'm never getting used to this. Tate looked at his brother, then back at Chloe. I believe, he said with mock seriousness, I'm not being adored nearly enough. He held out one hand toward her. Chloe. She raised an eyebrow. Yes. I require affection to recover from this emotional trauma. The table laughed again. Tate frowned dramatically. And another drink. No one moved. He stomped one foot against the hardwood floor like a stubborn child. Chloe. She couldn't suppress a smile. My drink. Chloe laughed, leaned over, and kissed him on the cheek. There. Tate's expression softened instantly. Better. The twin rolled his eyes. You're unbelievably high maintenance. I know, Tate replied matter-of-factly, I've accepted it. The fake Tate leaned back in his chair with an exaggerated grin. So, he said, do I talk about myself enough or should I keep going? I don't think everyone's fully appreciated how wonderful I am yet. Chloe burst into laughter. Oh, definitely keep going. That's what I thought. With theatrical confidence, the fake Tate reached over and gently patted Chloe's forearm. I'm earning brownie points, he announced. At this rate, I might even get lucky later. Before Chloe could respond, the real Tate appeared beside them and promptly swatted Noah's hand away. Stop touching my wife, creeper. The entire table laughed. The fake Tate looked up innocently. Our wife? Absolutely not. Our temporary wife. Tate folded his arms. Not even slightly. Noah smirked. You've become awfully possessive since you got married. I've always been possessive. Fair point. Tate narrowed his eyes. And what's with the hazel contacts, trying to steal my identity? Noah looked offended. Please, if I were stealing your identity, I'd at least demand everyone admire me every 5 minutes. I do not. You absolutely do. I don't. You stomp your foot when Chloe doesn't pay enough attention to you. Several relatives nodded in agreement. Tate glanced around the table. I am being unfairly represented. Noah leaned back and blew the longest, loudest raspberry in Tate's direction. Tate stared at him for a moment. Bite me. Maybe later, Noah replied with a grin. Groans and laughter echoed around the dining room as Chloe buried her face in her hands. I married into complete insanity. Talia smiled as she reached for her wine glass. The fake Tate leaned closer, a mischievous grin spreading across his face as his lips moved dangerously close to Chloe's cheek. Before he could get any closer, a hand appeared between them. The real Tate. With a completely serious expression, Tate pushed Noah backward, sending him tumbling off his chair and onto the carpet. The entire table erupted in laughter. Will you stop trying to seduce my wife? Tate demanded. Noah looked up from the floor, completely unbothered. I was being charming. You were being annoying. There's a difference. Yes. Noah dusted himself off and stood back up. Tate pointed at him. Keep your lips away from my wife. Chloe covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. You realize he isn't actually trying to steal me, right? I know. Then why are you acting jealous? Tate looked at Noah suspiciously. Because he enjoys making me jealous. Noah smiled proudly. Finally, someone understands me. Tate sighed. I live with 2 problems. One is my twin pretending to be me. The other is Noah enjoying every second of it. Correction, Noah said, taking his seat again. I make family dinners interesting. Chloe shook her head, laughing. That might be the most accurate thing anyone has said all night. The fake Tate spent the entire meal committed to the performance. He batted his eyelashes at Chloe, flashed exaggerated smiles, and gave her the kind of charming little winks that Tate had supposedly used on women for years. Chloe was trying her best not to laugh. Noah, completely committed to the act, had perfected Tate's old reputation, the confident posture, the smug expression, the effortless charm. He was giving everyone a ridiculous demonstration of how Tate supposedly won people over. I have to admit, Brooke said, watching the performance, the impression is disturbingly accurate. Tate narrowed his eyes. I don't like where this is going. Noah ignored him. Under the table, Noah gave Chloe's foot a playful nudge, continuing the act. That was when Tate noticed. His expression changed instantly. Absolutely not. Everyone looked over. Before Noah could react, Tate picked up a piece of broccoli from his plate and flicked it across the table. It flew through the air. Plop. It landed directly on Noah's nose before sliding off and dropping into his glass of Rob Roy. The table went silent for half a second. Then everyone burst into laughter. Noah slowly looked down at his drink. My cocktail has been assaulted. Tate leaned back in his chair, completely satisfied. Consider it a warning. A warning involving vegetables. Yes. Noah pulled the broccoli out of his glass and stared at it. You realize this is the strangest family dinner I've ever attended. Chloe smiled. You say that like it's a bad thing. Noah looked around the table, then at Tate. I didn't say that. Tate tried to hide his smile. He failed. Later that evening, everyone had gathered in the living room, continuing the chaos that somehow followed Tate and Noah everywhere. The fake Tate dropped onto the couch beside Chloe with an exaggerated grin. He started swaying his shoulders and shuffling around like he was performing for an audience, squeezing himself between Anna and Chloe. Hi dear, he said in an overly dramatic, slightly slurred voice. There sure are a lot of pretty ladies here tonight, aren't there? Chloe burst out laughing. You are ridiculous. I prefer charming, Noah replied, still perfectly committed to the act. From the kitchen, the real Tate returned carrying a glass of wine for Chloe. He stopped in the doorway. He stared. Noah was sitting beside his wife, completely impersonating Tate, even going so far as to give her the same confident smile Tate himself would have used. Then Tate noticed Noah's hand slowly creeping toward Chloe's. His expression immediately changed. No. Noah looked up innocently. What? Tate walked over and lightly smacked Noah's hand away. Stop. Ow, Noah said, pulling his hand back and rubbing it. That hurt. You deserved it. I was acting. You were enjoying yourself. Noah smiled. Maybe a little. Chloe shook her head, laughing. You two are impossible. Tate handed her the wine glass. I leave the room for 5 minutes and come back to my own twin trying to replace me. Noah looked offended. Replace you? I was improving the experience. Tate gave him a flat look. That's exactly what worries me. The room filled with laughter again as Chloe leaned back, watching the two men argue like they had been doing it their entire lives. Because in many ways they had. Noah committed fully to the performance. Using Tate's voice, he leaned closer to Chloe with an exaggeratedly serious expression and rested his cheek against hers. Fine, he sang softly in a dramatic voice, we're in love. He held the note longer than necessary, clearly enjoying himself. We're in love. Chloe immediately started laughing. Noah. He ignored her and continued the ridiculous imitation, keeping his cheek pressed against hers. Isn't that right? He sang in Tate's deep, serious tone. Aren't we in love? The living room erupted with laughter. Chloe shook her head, trying to pull herself together. You are unbelievable. Noah smiled proudly. I'm just showing everyone Tate's softer side. Terrence laughed. Oh no, Tate's mad. Across the room, the real Tate stared at him. I do not sound like that. Everyone turned to look at him. A pause. Then Brooke laughed. You absolutely do. Tate looked betrayed. No. Chloe smiled as Noah continued the dramatic performance. See, Noah said, even she knows. Tate walked over, shaking his head. You realize you're making fun of me while pretending to be me. Yes. And you think that's normal? No, Noah replied, I think it's hilarious. Chloe laughed again as Tate sighed, realizing there was no winning. The worst part was that Noah's impression was just accurate enough to make everyone believe he had practiced it for years. The telephone rang, cutting through the laughter in the living room. Noah immediately got off the couch and headed toward the kitchen to take the call. Tate watched him disappear through the doorway. His expression tightened. He narrowed his eyes at the empty space where Noah had been sitting. He was not about to let someone steal his wife's attention all evening, even if that someone was Noah pretending to be him. A few minutes passed. Then a few more. Noah still hadn't returned. Tate looked at Chloe. "I'm going to check on Noah." Chloe smiled. "Or the person who looks exactly like you." "Exactly." Tate walked into the kitchen and found Noah leaning against the counter, still on the phone. "Yeah, no problem," Noah was saying. "It'll probably be another hour, then I'll come over." Tate stopped. Noah continued, completely unaware he was being watched. "It's Sunday night, you know how long these family dinners go. Talia can talk forever and Susie somehow takes 7 hours of stories and condenses them into 3. Tate's eyebrows rose. Noah laughed quietly. "I should be done by 10, I'll probably be over around 10:30. A pause. "Yeah, I'll bring some wine, we can watch that show you like." Noah smiled as he listened. "All right, I'll see you soon, Riley's probably wondering where I am." He hung up the phone and turned around. He immediately noticed Tate standing there. "Are you leaving early?" Tate asked. Noah looked over and smiled. "Yeah, Riley called and wanted to know when I was coming by, that's about it." Tate nodded slowly, understanding. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say something else but decided against it. "Do you need any help with whatever Talia is serving after dinner?" Tate asked. Noah shook his head. "No, I'm okay." He gave Tate a reassuring smile. "I can handle it." Tate studied him for a second, then nodded. "All right." Noah smiled slightly. It was a simple exchange, but it was familiar. Tate didn't always know how to say that he wanted Noah to stay, and Noah had learned how to recognize the things Tate didn't say. Sometimes concern came disguised as a practical question. Sometimes "do you need help" really meant "are you okay?" And sometimes "I'm okay" was enough of an answer. "You don't have to worry about me," Noah said quietly. Tate looked up. Noah reached for a few bottles to make cocktails, avoiding his gaze. "We're not buddies anymore," he continued. "We're just two people who happen to be around the same people." Tate opened his mouth to respond. "Noah." But Noah cut him off. "I know you're used to taking care of me, I know you're used to looking out for me and making sure I'm okay. You've done it for years." He paused, setting the bottles down on the counter. "But I'm a big guy now, Tate. I can take care of myself. I don't need you stepping in every time you think something might go wrong." Tate's expression shifted. It wasn't anger, it was something closer to being caught off guard. "Noah." "No," Noah said softly. "You need to understand that I'm not the same person I was when we were younger." The kitchen became quiet. "I don't need your protection anymore." Then Noah added, almost like he was forcing himself to say the words out loud. "I'm actually thinking about moving." Tate immediately looked back at him. "Moving?" Noah nodded. "Yeah, what I have with Riley is serious," Noah said. Tate stayed quiet, listening. "I wouldn't be surprised if, within the next 6 months, I was engaged." Tate looked up slightly. "Not that it has to go in that direction," Noah added quickly. "I'm not trying to rush anything, but I don't see any reason why it couldn't. We're happy together." He paused. "You're a happily married man, Tate. Surely you want me to be happy too." Tate nodded slowly. "Of course I do." Noah studied his reaction for a moment before continuing. "I'm not even sure I'm going to be in California forever. Riley gets job offers from different states, sometimes even different countries. A year from now, I honestly don't know where I'll be." He picked up another bottle from the counter, his voice becoming quieter. "Maybe it's just time for us to separate." Tate's expression tightened. "Separate? We do our own things, you have your life, I have mine." He looked toward the doorway. "We'll still see each other on Sunday evenings, we'll still be part of the same circle of friends, but I think I need my own space." The words seemed to weigh more than Noah expected. "I think it might be best if I change my phone number too, and we sleep separately in different houses." Tate went still. "Noah." "You'll be okay," Noah said softly. "You have Chloe, you have your family, you have your life, it's time I build mine." Before Tate could respond, Noah walked out of the kitchen. Tate remained where he was, staring at the doorway long after Noah had disappeared. For years, Tate had assumed Noah would always be there. Not because he took him for granted exactly, but because Noah had always been there. And now, for the first time, Tate was being forced to consider what life looked like if Noah wasn't just a room away, a phone call away, or waiting at the end of every Sunday dinner. The silence of the kitchen suddenly felt much larger than it had a few minutes before. Tate stood alone in the corner of the room, watching the conversation around him without really hearing any of it. Chloe was surrounded by her friends, laughing as they crowded around her, completely unaware of the storm of thoughts running through his head. He forced himself to look away. He didn't want to think about what Noah had said. He didn't want to picture Noah living somewhere else. A different house. A life where Tate wasn't automatically part of his everyday routine. No, Tate muttered under his breath. The idea felt wrong. Unacceptable. For years, Noah had been a constant. He had been there through every chapter, every disaster, every moment Tate didn't know how to handle. Tate had always assumed that no matter how much things changed, Noah would somehow remain within reach. But now Noah was talking about leaving. Moving on. Building a life that didn't revolve around Tate. And Tate hated how much that scared him. Across the room, Chloe glanced over and noticed him standing alone. Tate. He looked up quickly. I'm fine. Chloe gave him a knowing look. She had learned that Tate's "I'm fine" usually meant the exact opposite. He looked back toward the kitchen doorway where Noah had disappeared. For the first time, Tate wondered if he had waited too long to realize how much Noah meant to him. Tate remained in the corner, pretending to listen to the conversations around him. He nodded when someone spoke, he smiled when someone laughed, he even answered a few questions. But his attention kept drifting back to the same thought. Noah leaving didn't make sense. Noah had always been there. When Tate was angry, Noah was there. When Tate shut everyone out, Noah was there. When Tate couldn't explain what he was feeling, Noah somehow understood anyway. Tate had spent years believing that was simply how things worked. Noah stayed. Tate never questioned it. Until now. You look like you're planning a murder. Chloe's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. Tate glanced at her. I'm thinking. That's usually when people should be worried. He gave her a look. I'm serious. Chloe softened. I know. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Tate quietly asked, did you know he was thinking about leaving? Chloe studied him. Noah. Tate nodded. He wants to move. Chloe didn't look surprised. Tate. What? Did you really think he was going to stay exactly where he was forever? The question caught him off guard. Tate looked away. I thought he was happy. He might be happy, Chloe said gently. That doesn't mean he doesn't want more. Tate frowned. He said we're not buddies anymore. Chloe watched his reaction carefully. And how did that make you feel? Tate didn't answer. He didn't have to. Chloe sighed softly. You know, for someone who hates admitting he has feelings, you make them pretty obvious when it comes to Noah. Tate looked annoyed. I do not. You do. I have a wife. I know I'm your wife. Exactly. Chloe smiled. And I also know you. Tate looked back toward the kitchen. The room was full of people, but suddenly he felt like he was standing alone. I don't want him to leave. The words came out quieter than he expected. Chloe's expression softened. Then maybe you should tell him. Tate shook his head. What would I say? Chloe smiled sadly. The truth. Tate looked toward the hallway again. For once, he wasn't afraid of losing an argument. He was afraid of losing someone who had been there his entire life. And he was beginning to realize those were two very different things. For the next few nights, Tate found himself waiting. He didn't admit it to anyone. He certainly wouldn't have admitted it to Noah. But every evening he ended up on the porch swing outside the house, staring out toward the driveway. Waiting. At first he told himself it was just habit. Noah would come home eventually, he always did. But the days passed. Then the nights. And something small began to confirm what Tate didn't want to acknowledge. The newspapers. For years, they had arrived every morning and piled up whenever Noah was away. Tate had never paid much attention to them because Noah always brought them inside. But now, after a week, the front porch was still clear. No stack of newspapers. No sign that Noah had been coming and going like he always had. The house was quieter. Too quiet. Tate leaned back on the porch swing and stared at the empty driveway. It was obvious. Noah wasn't coming home 7 nights a week anymore. He had another place to be. Another person waiting for him. Riley. Tate tried to convince himself that it was normal, that this was what happened when people grew up. They got relationships, they built separate lives, they stopped orbiting around the same people forever. But knowing something was normal didn't make it easier. A part of Tate had always assumed Noah would be there when he came home. Now, for the first time, Tate had to face the possibility that Noah had already started building a life where Tate wasn't the center of it. And that realization bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Tate knew he didn't have the right to feel replaced. That was the part that bothered him the most. Anyone looking at the situation from the outside would have seen it clearly. Noah was growing up. Noah was dating. Noah was building a future with someone else. At some point, he might get engaged, get married, and create a life that didn't revolve around Tate. And no one could honestly blame him. Tate had no claim over Noah's time. No claim over his choices. No claim over the future Noah was trying to build. The hardest truth was that Tate understood why. Nearly 2 years ago, Tate had been the one who pushed Noah away. He had created distance. He had changed the way they existed in each other's lives. He had allowed Noah to feel like he had to step back and find his own identity outside of their friendship. So why did it hurt now? Why did it feel like Noah was leaving him behind? Tate sat on the porch swing, staring at the empty driveway, knowing the answer. Because somewhere along the way, he had convinced himself that even if everything else changed, Noah would remain the one constant. He had never imagined that Noah would actually move forward. He had never considered what it would feel like when Noah stopped waiting. Tate wasn't angry at Noah. Noah wasn't doing anything wrong. He was doing exactly what Tate had always said he wanted him to do: live his own life, find happiness, and stop depending on Tate for everything. The problem was that Tate was finally realizing he missed being needed, and how much he missed Noah. Everyone in Tate's family believed they knew him. To them, Tate Blue was a stone-cold bastard. They saw the arrogance, the confidence, the carefully crafted image. They saw a man who seemed obsessed with his reputation, his appearance, his dick, his status, and the way the world viewed him. Talia, Terrence, Mark, and all of Noah's friends from Brown shared one belief. They thought Tate had abandoned Noah. From their perspective, the explanation was simple. Tate had chosen Chloe because she represented an easier life, a more acceptable life, a life that fit neatly into the expectations surrounding the Blue family name. Some believed Tate loved Chloe and had simply been too afraid to admit what Noah meant to him. Others believed something even more complicated, that Tate had chosen the path of least resistance, that he had surrendered to the expectations placed on him by society, by his family, and by the image everyone expected him to maintain. They wondered if Tate had given in to the pressure of appearing normal, even though, for most of his life, he had never seemed particularly concerned with anyone else's rules. The idea confused them. Tate had always been stubborn, he had always done what he wanted, he had never been someone who easily bent to public opinion. So why now? Why choose a life that seemed so different from everything they thought they understood about him? To Noah's friends, it looked like betrayal. They saw Noah as the person who had stood beside Tate through everything, only to be left behind when Tate decided to move forward. But what they didn't understand was that Tate's decision had never been as simple as they believed. They saw the choice he made. They didn't see the fear behind it. They didn't see the confusion, the guilt, or the years of emotions Tate had never learned how to express. They thought they understood Tate Blue. But they only knew the version of him that he allowed the world to see. They believed Tate cared only about himself, the attention, the admiration, the power of being considered one of the most desirable men in Los Angeles. And maybe from the outside it looked that way. But they were wrong about one thing. Tate Blue would never abandon Noah Lunas. Not in any shape or form. No matter how distant Tate became, no matter how angry or emotionally closed off he appeared, Noah was the one person who existed outside of all the things Tate pretended mattered. His family didn't understand that. His friends didn't understand that. They thought they knew Tate because they had seen his public face for years. They knew the man who walked into rooms expecting attention. They knew the man who rarely apologized. They knew the man who hid behind sarcasm, anger, and pride. But they didn't know the part of Tate that only Noah had ever seen. The part that worried. The part that cared. The part that was terrified of losing someone who had been there through every version of him. Everyone thought Tate Blue was incapable of needing anyone. They didn't realize Noah had been the exception for most of his life. And now that Noah was finally learning how to live without him, Tate was being forced to confront the one thing he had spent years avoiding. How much Noah had always meant to him. Tate never wanted to get married. It wasn't because he didn't want a wife or because he didn't have the temperament for marriage. It was because Tate never wanted to share his life with someone, preferably a stranger, who only knew pieces of him. The truth was, Noah barely knew Tate at all. Tate had lied to him from the beginning because Noah was never supposed to be a long-term relationship. It wasn't even supposed to be a relationship. It was just two kids enjoying each other's time, two people who happened to find comfort in each other. Then later, when Noah was supposed to leave, he didn't. And when it was time for Tate to leave, he couldn't. After Noah's mother died when they were 22 and fresh out of Brown, Tate convinced himself he stayed because no one needed him. He told himself he was simply being there for Noah because Noah had lost someone important. But that wasn't true. Tate needed Noah. And he could never tell anyone why. Tate had lied to his mother. What he had said on the phone was mostly true. The only part that wasn't true was the idea that Tate was a danger to anyone. Wayne hadn't lied. He had simply made an assumption that turned out to be wrong. Everything else, the reasons Tate had befriended Noah, the reasons behind the choices he made, the fears he carried, had been real. The one thing Wayne misunderstood was the nature of Tate and Noah's relationship. Tate wasn't a threat to Noah. But the complicated truth was that the reason Tate had originally allowed Noah into his life, and the reason Tate eventually married Chloe came from the same place. They were both responses to the same problem. Tate was afraid of needing someone. He was afraid of a connection he couldn't explain, afraid of a bond that had become too important, and afraid of what it meant to have someone who could see past the person he showed the world. Noah was the first person Tate let close. Chloe represented the life Tate thought he was supposed to have. Both choices came from Tate trying to solve the same fear. The problem was that Tate had spent so long running from the truth that he never realized he was running in two different directions at once. Tate stood on Noah's porch at the Rambler, staring out into the quiet street as he tried to come up with a reason. Any reason. Something he could say that wouldn't expose the truth. How could he tell Noah that he didn't want him to leave without explaining why? How could he ask him to stay without admitting the one thing Tate had spent years refusing to acknowledge? He couldn't tell Noah the truth. Not because he didn't know what it was. Because he knew it too well. For an entire week, Noah wasn't around. The house felt different. The silence felt heavier. And every day Tate convinced himself that he was fine. He wasn't. By the time the week ended, the frustration had built into something he couldn't contain. Standing on the porch, Tate finally lost his temper. He kicked the porch swing, sending it rocking violently. Damn it, Noah. Tomorrow would be Sunday dinner. The one place they were still expected to appear together. The one routine that remained. But after that, everything would change. The wedding was coming. And once that happened, nothing would be the same. Tate stared at the empty driveway, realizing the thing he feared most wasn't the wedding itself. It was the possibility that Noah would stop waiting for him. And Tate had no idea how to stop that from happening without finally telling the truth. Tate arrived on time for Sunday dinner, which in itself was unusual enough that everyone would have noticed. Talia opened the front door and took one look at him. Her eyes narrowed. Noah. Tate blinked. What? She looked him up and down, studying his hair, his clothes, and his expression. Are you Noah wearing Tate's hair and clothing again? Tate stared at her. Mother. Talia smiled. Every time Tate arrives early or on time, I have to question whether it's actually him. Tate shook his head and gently pushed past her into the house. Of course it's me, who the hell else would it be? Talia laughed. I don't know, I thought maybe Noah would eventually get bored of the joke and stop pretending to be you. Tate sighed. At some point the joke is going to get old and he won't do it anymore. Talia raised an eyebrow. You actually believe that? No. Good, because neither do I. Tate walked into the dining room and immediately noticed something was missing. Noah wasn't there. His eyes scanned the room. Where is the blonde little devil? Talia shrugged as she adjusted the table setting. He's not here yet. Tate frowned. He isn't. No, he said he was spending some time with Riley first. He'll be here eventually. She smiled slightly. Probably at least 15 minutes late. Tate looked toward the empty chair where Noah usually sat. 15 minutes. It shouldn't have bothered him. It was normal. Noah had always been late. But this time the empty seat felt different. Because Tate knew the reason. Noah wasn't late because he was distracted. He was late because he had somewhere else to be first. And for the first time, Tate realized he was no longer the place Noah automatically came back to. Where's my father? Tate asked, looking around the table. He noticed Terrence's chair was empty. He's not coming, Talia replied. He's at his study downtown working on a merger. He said he'd be home around midnight. Tate scoffed as he took his seat. Of course he is. He glanced toward the empty chair beside him. Well, I don't want to wait 15 minutes for that devil to get here. He paused. No, I meant. A few people at the table laughed. Why don't we just start eating? He can have whatever is left. Everyone agreed and dinner began. For the first time in a while, Tate actually tried to focus on the conversation instead of watching the doorway. It didn't work. Halfway through dinner, the front door finally opened. A moment later, Noah walked into the dining room. Excuse me. He moved quickly to his usual spot at the table and sat down. Anna and Talia immediately looked at him. There was something different about him. A little too relaxed. A little too happy. Anna narrowed her eyes. Somebody had a good evening. Noah froze. Then she grinned. Somebody got lucky. Noah's face immediately turned bright red. I'm sorry I ran a little late, he said, trying to recover. Riley and I were just spending some time together. The blush on his cheeks made the explanation unnecessary. Tate, sitting across from him, was not amused. Not even slightly. He stared at Noah for a moment, then looked back down at his plate. Everyone else noticed. Because Tate Blue could hide a lot of things. Jealousy was not one of them. I got a new phone number and a new mobile phone, Noah announced casually. Everyone looked up. Noah smiled proudly. I decided I deserved an upgrade after 7 years of using that old prehistoric device. I wasn't sure if people still said typing or texting, but apparently I've entered the modern age. Anna laughed. Welcome to the later part of the 20th century. Noah pointed at her. Exactly, I'm basically living in the future now. Tate nudged Noah under the table. Noah didn't react. Not even a glance. Tate frowned. Usually Noah would have noticed immediately. Usually Noah would have made some sarcastic comment. But now Noah simply continued eating, completely ignoring him. Tate didn't like how much he noticed. The conversation moved on, and eventually Talia turned her attention to Noah. So, she said warmly, when are we going to meet this wonderful human being you've been dating for a year? Noah looked up. Riley. Talia nodded. Yes, Riley. Noah smiled, but then his cheeks started turning slightly red. Tate noticed. Of course he noticed. Everyone else might have missed it, but Tate knew Noah well enough to recognize every little expression. Well, Noah said. Talia smiled. Well, when we know we're making a serious commitment. Talia raised an eyebrow. Serious commitment. She paused. Do you mean something like an engagement? Noah immediately shook his head. No, I mean, when we know we're right for each other, when we know it's something long-term. His voice softened. Then I'll introduce everyone. Talia smiled. I would love that. Anna leaned toward Talia, trying not to laugh. I cannot wait to see Tate's face when he meets Riley. She laughed quietly. Tate looked between them. What? Anna smiled innocently. Nothing. No what? Nothing at all. Tate frowned. He genuinely didn't understand why everyone suddenly found the situation amusing. But across the table no one noticed. And for the first time, Tate wasn't the person Noah was trying to reassure. I gave all of you my phone number, Noah explained. He looked around the table with a small smile. Well, my new one anyway. Tate looked up. New one? Noah nodded. I wanted something more personal. I'm keeping the old number as my business phone. Everyone continued the conversation, but Tate stayed quiet. Because there was one detail he couldn't ignore. Everyone had Noah's new number. Everyone except him. Tate glanced around the table. Talia had it. Anna had it. The others had it. But not Tate. For years, Noah had been the person Tate could reach at any moment. A phone call, a text, a quick message, Noah had always been there. Now Noah had changed his number, and Tate hadn't even crossed his mind as someone who needed the new one. Tate tried not to let his expression change. He failed. Noah noticed. For a brief second their eyes met. Tate looked away first. It shouldn't have bothered him. That was what he told himself. Noah was allowed to have boundaries. He was allowed to create a life outside of Tate. He was allowed to decide who had access to him. But the small change felt bigger than a phone number. It felt like proof. Noah was slowly separating the parts of his life that belonged to Tate and the parts that belonged only to himself. And Tate was beginning to realize he didn't know where he fit anymore. Noah slipped on his shoes while saying goodbye to everyone. The conversation was over as far as he was concerned. He stepped out the front door, crossed the porch, and started walking across the lawn toward his car. The cool evening air hit his face, but it did nothing to quiet the thoughts racing through his mind. He was halfway across the yard when he heard footsteps behind him. Noah! He didn't stop. The footsteps quickened until Tate caught up to him. Tate reached out and caught Noah by the shoulder, his hand firm but hesitant, as though he wasn't sure Noah would let him touch him at all. Noah stopped walking. Slowly he turned around. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The distance between them was only a few feet, but it felt greater than it ever had before. Tate's hand slipped from Noah's shoulder, yet neither of them looked away. Noah searched Tate's face, trying to decide whether he wanted an explanation, an apology, or simply the courage to keep walking. Tate finally broke the silence. Please don't leave. What? Noah asked, genuinely confused. But I always leave around this time every Sunday. That's not what I mean, Tate interrupted, his voice breaking before he could stop it. Noah frowned. Tate took a slow breath, his eyes fixed on Noah's. Don't leave me. The words hung between them. I'm not talking about tonight, I'm talking about don't go away. Noah stared at him. I don't want you to leave Los Angeles, Tate continued. I don't want you to build a life somewhere else. I don't want you to meet someone, fall in love, and wake up one day realizing you don't need me anymore. Noah could hear the fear beneath every word. I know you leave after Sunday dinner, Tate said quietly. You always have, I never stopped you. His voice became softer. But lately, every time I watch you walk across that lawn, I wonder if it's going to be the last time you come back. Noah didn't know what to say. Tate looked away for a moment before forcing himself to continue. I can survive you driving home tonight. He looked back into Noah's eyes. I don't think I could survive watching you leave my life forever. The rain had begun to fall, neither of them moving as the silence stretched between them. For the first time, Noah realized Tate hadn't chased him across the lawn because Sunday dinner had ended. He had chased him because he was terrified that one day Noah would keep walking and never come back. I already told you, Noah said, shoving Tate backward, you chose the life you wanted. Tate stumbled a step but didn't take his eyes off Noah. You chose to get married, you chose to have a family, to build a life, to be who you wanted to be. Noah's voice shook with years of frustration. I deserve those same choices, I deserve the same opportunities. Tate opened his mouth, but Noah cut him off. No, you don't get to do this. The words came faster now, years of hurt finally spilling out. You can't make every decision for your own life and then at the very end decide that when I make the same choices, somehow it's different. You don't get a double standard. Noah pointed toward the house. We're not buddies anymore, we just happen to know the same people. We've had this conversation a dozen times and I don't know what's so hard for you to understand. His eyes filled with frustration. You chose to leave the Rambler, you chose to build a life that didn't revolve around me. You can't make those decisions and honestly believe nothing changes. It changes everything. Tate stood speechless. It's not fair, Noah continued. It's been almost 10 years since I graduated high school. 10 years, Tate. He let that sink in. Riley is the person I want. Tate's face fell. I have a chance to be as happy with Riley as you are with Chloe. The silence was deafening. And what do you want from me? Noah asked bitterly. You want me to give all of that up, wait around in case you need me, be your emotional backup plans, your bed warmer whenever it's convenient for you. He shook his head. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Noah took another step back. I'm done putting my life on hold so you can have yours. His voice softened, but it hurt even more. You made your choice, Tate. Noah looked at him one last time. Now I'm making mine. I want things, Noah said, that you can't give me. Tate's expression fell, but Noah kept going. I want to be with someone who's emotionally transparent, someone who's consistently warm, someone who pursues me the way I deserve to be pursued. He shook his head. I want someone who sees me as the only choice, not one choice out of many. I don't want to be someone's backup plan. I don't want to be someone's placeholder while they figure out what they really want. Noah looked Tate straight in the eyes. I want to be the only man on someone's radar. His voice softened for only a moment. And it's okay if that's not the kind of relationship you want. There's nothing wrong with wanting something different. Then his resolve returned. But it is what I want. I want to live my life the way I choose to live it. He gestured between them. If I stay with you, what do I get out of it? Nostalgia. He gave a hollow laugh. I can get nostalgia by watching a recording of one of your birthday parties. Nostalgia doesn't keep you warm at night, Tate. It doesn't build a future and it doesn't pay the bills. Tate lowered his eyes. You chose to leave me, you chose for us to just be buddies, you made that decision. Noah's voice grew firmer. You don't get to rewrite history because you suddenly realize your memories aren't as rose-colored as you wanted them to be. He paused. You chose Chloe and she chose you. The words landed with painful finality. You have responsibilities now, you have a life you built. If you're unhappy, then fix it. If you can't fix it, then deal with it. Noah took a step backward. I'm not responsible for rescuing you from the consequences of your own choices. He drew a slow breath. I'm moving toward something, Tate. I'm building a future instead of living in the past. His eyes didn't leave Tate's. And I want my relationship to give me what I've always wanted. Love that's freely given, honesty without guessing, commitment without competition, and someone who wakes up every day knowing that I'm the person they choose. Another step back. I deserve that. The rain continued to fall between them. And for the first time in a long time, I'm choosing myself. Be my friend, Tate said, his voice breaking. He sniffled, trying to hold himself together. No thanks, Noah replied quietly. Tate looked up. I already have at least 6 friends, I don't need a 7th. The words weren't cruel, they were matter of fact. My business is thriving, my life is full of people, friendship isn't what I'm missing. Noah met Tate's eyes. I want a partner. I want someone who wants me back the way I want them. I have enough platonic relationships in my life, I don't need another one. He shook his head. I just don't think we have anything in common anymore. Knowing the same people isn't having something in common, Tate. If it were, then all of my employees would be my friends. The truth settled heavily between them. We're just going in different directions. Noah could see the fear in Tate's face. And I know you're afraid. His voice softened, but his resolve didn't. But I can't fix that, and it's not my job to fix it. He took another step toward his car. Let me go. A long silence followed. I let you go when you left. Tate flinched. Sure, the way you left was wrong, you disappeared, you didn't reach out, you never explained yourself. Noah exhaled slowly. But I've learned how I want to leave a relationship. He looked Tate directly in the eyes. So I'm telling you in person. Live your life. And let me live mine. His voice became firm again. I'm tired of being one of many people in your life. He gestured toward the house. So go home to your wife. Go home to the life you built, go home to the bed and the house you share with her. Tate's eyes filled with tears. Because the store with Noah's name on it. Noah paused, letting the words sink in. Is closed. You're not going to get anything more from me. He opened his car door. I spent years waiting for you to choose me. He looked back one last time. You already made your choice. Then Noah got into the car, leaving Tate standing alone in the rain with nothing left to say. Tate stood at the edge of the driveway, staring after Noah's car until the taillights disappeared around the corner. He was probably driving to Riley. The thought settled in Tate's chest like a weight he couldn't lift. The house behind him had gone quiet. Sunday dinner was over, but Tate couldn't make himself go back inside. His hands hung at his sides as the rain dampened his coat, though he barely seemed to notice. The front door opened. Andrew stepped onto the porch, his phone pressed to his ear. I'll call you back. His eyes had found Tate. Without waiting for a response, Andrew ended the call and slipped his phone into his pocket as he walked across the lawn. Hey. Tate didn't move. Andrew stopped a few feet away. Are you okay? He asked, because you don't look okay. Tate gave a humorless laugh. I'm fine. Andrew said nothing. Tate forced a smile that never reached his eyes. I'm perfectly fine. Andrew studied him for a long moment before quietly replying, You've known me too long to expect me to believe that. Tate looked away toward the empty street where Noah's car had disappeared. I just watched the person I've loved for years drive away, he whispered. Tell me, what part of that is supposed to look fine? The last word caught in his throat. Andrew stepped closer but didn't try to touch him. Instead, he stood beside Tate in silence, watching the empty road, understanding that sometimes the hardest thing wasn't losing someone. It was realizing they had finally stopped waiting for you. Tate climbed into his luxury car and pulled away from the curb. He didn't remember most of the drive. Every turn, every stoplight, every mile blurred together until he found himself parked in front of Noah's house. He got out, walked up the front steps and knocked. For a moment there was only silence. Then he heard voices from inside. A laugh. Footsteps. The unmistakable sounds of two people fucking in Noah's bed, spending an intimate evening together. Tate closed his eyes. It wasn't that Noah had moved on that hurt the most. It was the realization that he no longer held the place in Noah's life that he once had. Noah had found someone else to come home to. Someone else to share his evenings with. Someone else whose presence filled the empty side of the bed. Tate's own house suddenly felt colder than it ever had before. He knocked again, harder this time. No answer. The panic rising in his chest overcame his judgment. He began pounding on the front door. Noah. A second later, the door swung open with a bang. Noah stood in the doorway wearing a bathrobe, his hair still damp, his expression dark with irritation. What? Noah snapped. What could possibly be so important that you had to come pounding on my door in the middle of the night? Tate stood frozen on the porch. The speech he had rehearsed during the drive disappeared the moment he looked into Noah's eyes. For the first time, he realized he hadn't come because he was angry. He had come because he couldn't bear the thought that Noah's life was finally moving forward without him. I'm entertaining Riley, Noah said flatly. Could you please leave? It's inappropriate for you to be here. Tate didn't move. I told you we're done. Noah folded his arms across his chest. I don't know how else to say it so you'll understand. I already explained it in the King's English. For a moment Tate simply stared at him. Then something inside him seemed to break. He stepped forward and wrapped both arms around Noah before Noah could react. No, Tate whispered. His shoulders shook as hot tears spilled down his face. He clung to Noah with the desperation of someone terrified that letting go meant losing him forever. His composure, so carefully maintained in front of everyone else, collapsed completely. He buried his face against Noah's shoulder, crying openly. "I can't," he choked out, "I can't do this." His hands trembled as they slid into Noah's hair, his fingers combing through it with familiar tenderness born from years of habit. He pressed a trembling kiss against Noah's temple, then another, silently pleading for a future that was already slipping away. Noah stood rigid. He didn't return the embrace. "Tate." There was no anger in his voice now, only sadness. "You have to let me go." Tate held on tighter for one brief moment, as if he could stop time through sheer force of will. "You're my home," he whispered. Noah closed his eyes. "No," he said quietly, "I used to be." He gently but firmly took hold of Tate's wrists and eased them away from his shoulders. "You're standing on my porch while Riley is inside my house." The words landed with unmistakable finality. "This isn't fair to me, it isn't fair to Riley, and it isn't fair to you." Tate lowered his head, tears still falling. "You have to go home." The sentence was gentle, but it left no room for hope. Large hot tears streamed down Tate's cheeks. His hands reached instinctively toward Noah, searching for one more touch, one more chance to hold on. But Noah stepped back. The distance between them was only a step. It felt like a lifetime. "Go home to Chloe," Noah said quietly, "or go out with your friends, do something that makes you happy." Tate's hand slowly fell to his sides. "But you can't stay here." His voice remained calm, even though his heart ached. "Move on, Tate." Tate's lips trembled but no words came. "I already have," Noah continued. "I moved on 2 years ago." The sentence hit harder than anything else Noah had said that night. "I don't want to have this conversation again." Tate stood motionless, tears continuing to roll down his face. "You're out of my life." Noah held Tate's gaze for one last moment, not with anger but with acceptance. Then he slowly closed the front door. The latch clicked. The sound echoed through the quiet night. Tate remained standing alone on the porch, staring at the closed door where Noah had disappeared, realizing that for the first time in 24 years there was no reason left to knock. Tate climbed back into his car and shut the door. Then everything he had spent a lifetime holding together came apart. He folded over the steering wheel as sobs tore through him, crying with a force that seemed to belong to every year he had spent swallowing his fear, his grief, and his loneliness. It felt as though he was crying every tear he had refused to shed since he was 4 years old. His chest ached and hands trembled. For a fleeting moment, the temptation was almost unbearable. He could tell Noah everything. He could explain every secret, every sacrifice, every lie that had been told to protect Noah. He could finally make Noah understand why he had made the choices he did. Tate knew deep down that if Noah knew the whole truth, he probably wouldn't have let him walk away. But that wasn't what Tate wanted. He didn't want Noah to stay because of guilt. He didn't want Noah to love him because he pitied him. He didn't want Noah to choose him because he finally understood every wound, every burden, and every secret. He wanted Noah to love him without needing the explanation. Without knowing everything. Without the truth forcing his hand. But that chance was gone. As the tears continued to fall, Tate realized the hardest part wasn't that Noah had closed the door. It was believing that Noah had stopped loving him long before tonight. Maybe 10 years ago. Maybe around the time their lives began moving in different directions. Maybe the person Tate had spent all these years trying to protect had already said goodbye without either of them realizing it. For the first time in his life, Tate allowed himself to wonder whether some things could be protected for so long that, in the end, there was nothing left to save. Tate's cell phone rang. His heart lurched. For one impossible moment he convinced himself it was Noah. Maybe Noah had changed his mind, maybe he was calling to say, "Come back, let's talk." Tate wiped at his eyes and answered immediately. "Hello." "Hey honey." It was Talia. She sounded warm, almost cheerful. "I was wondering if you'd like to come over for dinner tomorrow night. Your father wants to talk to you about something. He's still at the office or he would have called you himself, but he's pretty busy. Tate closed his eyes for a moment, pushing everything that had just happened to the back of his mind. Yeah, he said quietly, I'll come to dinner tomorrow night. Good, Talia replied with a smile in her voice. We'll see you then, honey. The call ended. The screen went dark. Tate stared at his own reflection for a long moment before setting the phone on the passenger seat. The brief flicker of hope that it had been Noah disappeared as quickly as it had come. He started the engine. Tate drove in silence, the windshield blurred by a light rain and eyes that still hadn't stopped burning. Halfway home, he tightened his grip on the steering wheel. No. He wasn't ready to go home. There was one place he needed to go before he could face Chloe. He flicked on his turn signal, took the next exit, and pointed the car toward downtown. As the city lights grew brighter in the distance, his thoughts drifted to Chloe. She would probably wonder where he was. She might already be home, settling in for the evening, expecting him to walk through the front door eventually. The thought filled him with guilt. She had done nothing wrong, yet she was waiting for a husband whose heart was in pieces. Tate knew he couldn't walk into the house looking the way he did. His eyes were swollen from crying, his face streaked with tears, and his mind was still replaying every word Noah had said. He needed time. Time to gather himself. Time to become the version of himself everyone expected to see. Only then could he go home. On the other side of town, Susie, Anna, and Bree were spending the rest of their evening after Sunday dinner at their favorite bowling alley. The three friends had made a tradition of getting together twice a month. Years ago, their conversations had always drifted back to the same topic, Tate and Noah. They had jokingly kept a betting pool over whether the two of them would ever admit what everyone else seemed to see. That betting pool had quietly dissolved the day Tate married Chloe. Even so, the conversations never really stopped. Between frames, laughter, and friendly competition, someone inevitably brought them up again. I still think they were supposed to end up together, Bree said, watching her bowling ball roll down the lane. Anna nodded. I always thought so too. They had 24 years of history. I kept waiting for one of them to realize what they had. Susie sighed as she leaned against the ball return. Wrong timing, she said. That's what it always felt like. Every time one of them was ready, the other wasn't. None of them were trying to interfere in anyone's life. It had simply become one of those conversations that resurfaced every few weeks, a discussion about what might have been, how differently things could have turned out, and whether two people who had cared so deeply for one another had simply missed their chance. As another frame began, the conversation shifted back to bowling, but the thought lingered in the back of each of their minds. Some stories didn't end because people stopped caring. Sometimes they ended because life carried them in different directions before either of them realized what they were losing. If I had one wish in the world, Anna said as she picked up her bowling ball, you'd never guess what it would be. Her girlfriend nudged her with a grin. Well, Anna smiled to herself. I'd want to know what Tate is really thinking. She released the ball, watching it glide down the lane before turning back to the group. Is he really that blind? Does he honestly not see Noah the way we always thought he did? She paused. Or... Her smile faded. Did he marry Chloe because it was easier than dealing with the elephant in the room? The question lingered. Bree folded her arms. You mean, because marrying Chloe gave him an answer he could live with, even if it wasn't the one he really wanted? Anna shrugged. I don't know, that's why I'd want to know what goes on inside his head. From the outside he looks impossible to read. Sometimes he acts like Noah is the center of his universe, and other times he pushes him away so hard you'd think they were strangers. Susie sighed. Maybe that's the tragedy of the whole thing. We can all see what they did. We can all guess why they made the choices they made. She looked down the lane. But only Tate knows whether he built the life he truly wanted, or the life he convinced himself he was supposed to have. For a moment none of them spoke. The crash of bowling pins echoed through the alley, but their thoughts remained somewhere else entirely, with two people whose story still felt unfinished. I agree, Bree said, setting her bowling ball on the return. Either Tate is the most emotionally repressed man I've ever met, or he simply doesn't feel that way about Noah. She shrugged. And honestly, his happiness is his responsibility. If he wants to spend his life happy or miserable, that's his decision. Her expression softened. But the people I actually feel sorry for are Chloe and Noah. Anna looked over. Why them? Because they're the ones living with the consequences, Bree replied. Noah has spent years trying to figure out where he stands, and Chloe married someone who, I don't know. She searched for the right words. Sometimes it feels like there's a third person in that marriage, even if nobody says it out loud. Susie leaned against the table. So you think there's a triangle? Bree nodded slowly. I don't know exactly what it is, but that's what it feels like. Every time Tate and Noah are in the same room, there's this history between them that never seems to go away. Whether it's friendship, regret, unresolved feelings, or something else entirely, it's always there. Anna frowned thoughtfully. And the sad part is, we don't actually know what's going on inside Tate's head. No, Bree agreed, we're all just guessing. Susie sighed. And while everyone's trying to figure Tate out, Noah is trying to move forward and Chloe is trying to build a marriage. For a moment the three women fell silent. The sounds of bowling balls rolling down the lanes and pins crashing filled the space between them. Finally, Anna picked up her ball. I just hope, she said quietly, that whatever the truth is, nobody else gets hurt because the people involved waited too long to say it. I think Tate's waited too long, Susie said. Anna looked over. What do you mean? Tate had options, Susie replied. He had so many opportunities. It was like standing in front of an elevator with every floor available and he never got on, or he got on and stepped right back off before the doors closed. Bree nodded, listening. He could have said something before Noah left his house when they were seniors. He could have said something when Noah came back. He could have said something at Brown when all the stuff with Mark was happening. She counted the moments off on her fingers. He could have admitted it after Noah's mother died. He could have said something when they moved into the Rambler house. What about before he married Chloe, or any of the opportunities he's had since he's been married? Susie sighed. To me, it's like Noah is a train with hundreds of stops. Every few months, another station comes along where Tate could get on, and every single time he just stands on the platform and watches it leave. And he never explains why, Anna added. Exactly, Susie said. That's why I don't think Tate wants Noah in that way. Maybe he doesn't have romantic feelings for Noah. She folded her arms. But whatever the answer is, he never commits to it. He doesn't move toward Noah, and he doesn't completely let Noah go either. Bree frowned. So he's stuck. Right, Susie said. He never chooses a lane. From the outside, it looks like he's afraid of making the wrong decision, so he makes no decision at all. Anna stared down the bowling lane. And sometimes, making no decision ends up being the biggest decision of all. The three of them stood quietly for a moment. Whatever Tate truly felt, they couldn't know. What they could see was that years had passed, opportunities had come and gone, and Noah's life had continued moving forward whether Tate was ready or not. I think we're just going to have to accept it, Susie said as she watched the pins being reset. Nothing's ever going to happen. Anna and Bree looked at her. Maybe that's just how their story ends. She let out a quiet sigh. And Chloe, Susie paused, she's either the luckiest woman on earth for ending up with Tate. She shook her head. Or she's the unluckiest. Bree frowned. Why do you say that? Because if Tate truly wants the life he has, then she's incredibly fortunate. Susie looked down at the polished wood of the bowling lane. But if, deep down, he wants something else and can't admit it, even to himself, that's a painful place for both of them to be. Anna nodded slowly. I honestly don't know if I'd want to be in Chloe's position, she admitted. Not because of who Tate is, but because uncertainty can be hard to live with. If you're always wondering whether your partner is completely present, that's a heavy question to carry. Bree sighed. And the truth is, we don't know what's in Tate's heart. No, Susie agreed. We only know what we've seen from the outside. For a moment the three women stood in silence. The game continued around them, but their conversation had reached its natural end. Whatever the truth was, it belonged to Tate, Chloe, and Noah. not to the people trying to make sense of it from the sidelines. About an hour after everyone had left Sunday dinner, Talia picked up her phone and called Andrew. Andrew answered on the second ring. "Good evening, Talia." "Good evening," she replied. "I was hoping you might have time to meet for lunch sometime this week. I'd like you, Tate, and me to sit down together." Andrew could hear the concern in her voice. "What's going on?" "Tate isn't himself," Talia admitted. "He's been carrying so much for so long, and I'm worried he's finally reached a breaking point." Andrew was quiet. "I don't want to wait until there's a bigger crisis before we do something." "So you were thinking about therapy?" Andrew asked. Talia sighed. "Yes, I think it's time we encourage him to talk to someone professionally, not because there's something wrong with him but because he shouldn't have to carry everything by himself." She paused. "And Chloe shouldn't be expected to shoulder the weight of his emotional struggles either. She's his wife, not his therapist." Andrew nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "I agree. I want Tate to have some autonomy," Talia continued. "I want him to have healthy support, learn ways to manage his emotions, and make his own decisions about how he wants to move forward. I don't want him to feel like he's trapped inside everything he's been carrying." "I'll be there," Andrew said. "If Tate agrees to lunch, I'll come." "Thank you." After they ended the call, Talia sat quietly for a moment. For the first time in years, she wasn't trying to solve Tate's problems for him. She was simply hoping to help him find the support he deserved. Chloe waited for Tate to come home. She tried to keep herself occupied, sitting on the couch with a Sudoku puzzle balanced in her lap. The numbers and empty squares gave her something simple to focus on while the hours passed. Every so often, she glanced toward the front door. She told herself not to worry. Tate had said he would be home eventually. She knew him well enough to know that sometimes he needed time to process things before he was ready to talk. But as the clock moved closer to 11, the puzzle became harder to concentrate on. The same numbers blurred together. Eventually, the pencil slipped from her fingers, and she fell asleep on the couch. The sound of the shower running woke her. For a moment, Chloe was disoriented, unsure what time it was or where she was. Then she heard the water. Tate was home. She slowly sat up, looking toward the hallway. Relief came first. Then concern. Because even from the other room, something about the quietness of the house felt different. Tate was home. But Chloe had the uneasy feeling that whatever had happened that night had followed him through the door. 10 minutes later, Tate stepped out of the shower. The house was quiet as he changed and climbed into bed beside Chloe. The exhaustion of the night had finally caught up with him. His body felt heavy, and for the first time in hours, his mind started to slow down. Neither of them said anything. They simply fell asleep. A few hours later, the silence of the bedroom was shattered by the ringing of a phone. It was around 3 in the morning. Chloe stirred awake, confused by the sudden sound. Tate reached for his mobile on the nightstand, still half asleep. "Hello." A pause. Then his expression changed. "Mother, slow down, I can't understand you." Chloe opened her eyes fully. Something was wrong. "What?" Tate suddenly said, sitting up. The concern in his voice made sleep disappear instantly. Why was Talia calling at 3 in the morning? Chloe watched Tate listen, his face becoming more serious with every second. "Of course," he said finally, "I'll be right there." He ended the call and immediately started getting dressed. Chloe pushed herself up. "Tate, what happened?" He looked at her, his expression tense, then told Talia on the phone to call Noah. "Call Noah." The words made Chloe freeze. "Noah." "We'll be there in 10 minutes, Tate said, already reaching for his keys. Chloe stared at him, trying to understand. A few hours ago, Tate had been devastated because Noah had walked away. Now, in the middle of the night when something was wrong, Talia and Noah were the people Tate needed. And Chloe couldn't stop herself from wondering why. Tate hung up the phone. "Get dressed, Chloe, we're going over to Talia's." He was already moving, pulling clothes out and getting dressed faster than she had ever seen him. Chloe pushed herself out of bed, still trying to wake up. "What's going on?" "I don't know," Tate said. He pulled on his pants and reached for his shirt. "She said something happened but she wouldn't tell me what." She just said she wanted everyone to come to the house because she had an announcement to make. Chloe watched him, the urgency in his movements making her more nervous. At 3 in the morning. Tate didn't answer. He grabbed his keys. Get ready, I'm leaving in 5 minutes. Chloe stared at him. 5 minutes. Hopefully you get there before I have to leave. The seriousness in his voice told her this wasn't a normal family gathering. Whatever Talia needed to say, it was important enough to wake everyone in the middle of the night. And Tate looked like he was already afraid of what he was about to hear. The drive over to Talia's took longer than usual. Rain poured down over the streets, making the roads slick and the city lights blur against the windshield. Tate sat quietly, his hands tight around the steering wheel, his mind racing through every possibility. Something had happened. He just didn't know what. Across town, Noah was asleep beside Riley when his phone rang. The sound pulled him out of a deep sleep. Still half asleep, he reached for it. Hello. For a moment he only heard silence. Then he heard Talia. She was crying. Noah. His eyes opened fully. Mom, what's wrong? But Talia didn't answer the question. I need you to come to the house. Noah sat up. What happened? I can't explain over the phone, she said, her voice breaking. I need everyone here, I need to tell everyone at the same time. Noah felt a knot form in his stomach. Mom. Please, Noah. The fear in her voice made him stop asking questions. I'll be there. He hung up and immediately got dressed. Riley stirred awake, blinking as Noah moved around the room. What time is it? He asked groggily. Early. Riley looked at him confused. Why are you getting up? Noah grabbed his jacket. I have to go over to my mother's house. Is everything okay? Noah hesitated. I don't know. He looked back at Riley. I'll be back as soon as I can, I'll text you. Riley nodded slowly, still trying to wake up. Noah grabbed his keys and walked out into the rain. A few minutes later he was driving toward Talia's house, wondering what could have made her wake everyone in the middle of the night. And why she sounded like she was afraid. Talia had called everyone. Not just family. She had called Noah's friends too. If she was going to tell them what had happened, she wanted everyone to hear it at the same time. She didn't want rumors, misunderstandings, or pieces of the truth spreading before she had a chance to explain. One by one, people began arriving at the house. The rain continued outside as Talia opened the door and welcomed everyone in. The moment they stepped inside, the questions started. What happened? Is everyone okay? Why did you call us this late? Talia only shook her head. I'll explain when everyone is here. The uncertainty in her voice made everyone even more nervous. Mark sat quietly in the corner of the room, watching everything unfold. He didn't say much, but his eyes moved from person to person, trying to understand why everyone had been brought together in the middle of the night. Andrew moved through the kitchen, trying to give everyone something to do while they waited. He made a pitcher of lemonade and brought out coffee, knowing people were going to need something to keep their hands busy. The atmosphere in the house felt heavy. No one knew what they were waiting for. Then Tate and Chloe arrived first. Tate stepped inside, his expression tense, and Chloe followed close behind. They exchanged quiet greetings with everyone before finding a place to sit. More people arrived after them. The living room slowly filled. Friends. Family. People connected by years of history and secrets they didn't fully understand. Everyone eventually took their seats, facing toward Talia. The room grew quiet. The rain tapped against the windows. Talia stood at the front of the room, looking at the people gathered before her. Everyone was waiting. Waiting for her to explain why she had called them there in the middle of the night. Finally, she took a breath. I need to tell you all something. Talia reached over and turned off her phone, making sure there would be no interruptions. She looked around the room at everyone gathered there. I'm sorry for waking all of you up, she said quietly. The room remained silent. I got a call 10 minutes before I called Tate. A few people exchanged worried looks. I wanted all of you here because I didn't want anyone finding out separately. I didn't want people hearing different versions of what happened. You all deserve to hear it at the same time. Talia swallowed hard. I don't know how to say this. Her voice cracked slightly. For a moment she looked down at her hands, gathering the courage to continue. But before I do, everyone sit down if you aren't already. Andrew moved through the room, passing around coffee to the people who had barely been awake when they arrived. The warmth of the cups gave everyone something to hold on to while they waited. A few people took quiet sips, still trying to fully wake up. The room felt heavy. No one joked. No one asked another question. They could tell from Talia's expression that whatever she was about to say had changed something. Talia took a slow breath. Okay, she whispered. Everyone looked toward her. I'm going to tell you what happened. I don't know how to say this without. Talia stopped talking. The sudden interruption made everyone look over. Talia froze. Andrew leaned forward slightly, his expression changing as he watched her struggle to find the words. Just tell us, he said gently, whatever it is, just tell us. Talia took a shaky breath and nodded. I received a call from Hillary down at the office. The room became even quieter. She was coming back with some memos. She needed to log them into the computer before tomorrow. Talia looked around at everyone gathered in the room. She went into the office because she thought she was just finishing up some paperwork. Her hands tightened together. But while she was there, she found something. A few people exchanged nervous glances. What did she find? Someone asked. Talia looked down for a moment. That's the part I'm trying to explain. She swallowed. She called me because she didn't know what to do with what she saw. The room fell silent again. Even the sound of the rain outside seemed louder. Tate sat forward in his chair, watching his mother carefully. Mom, he said quietly, what did Hillary find? Talia looked at him. And everyone in the room could see the fear in her eyes before she even answered. It's not about the memos, Talia said quietly. Everyone looked at her. She came back to the office around 10 o'clock tonight to finish her work. She had some documents to log for tomorrow's meetings, the ones connected to the Blue Company. Talia paused, her expression becoming more serious. She let herself in with her key. She wasn't expecting anyone else to be there. She was just doing what she always does, finishing what needed to be done before the next day. Tate leaned forward. So what happened? Talia looked down at her hands. She finished entering the memos into the computer. The room remained silent. And then she found something. A nervous feeling moved through the room. What did she find? Chloe asked softly. Talia looked around at everyone. She called me because she didn't know what to do. Her voice became quieter. She said it wasn't something that could wait until morning. Tate's expression changed. Mom. Talia took a breath. I need everyone to understand something before I continue. Hillary didn't go looking for this. She wasn't investigating anything. She was doing her job and she came across something that she believes changes everything. Everyone waited for Talia to explain what Hillary had discovered. Talia couldn't hold it together anymore. Her face crumpled and tears spilled down her cheeks. He was just awful, she whispered. The room went completely silent. Tate immediately sat up straighter, his expression changing as he watched his mother struggle. I went down to the office myself, Talia continued, wiping at her face. I needed to find out if what Hillary saw was actually true. She took a shaky breath. Because I thought maybe there was another explanation. Her voice broke. I thought maybe she was exhausted. She hadn't slept in over 24 hours. I thought maybe she was overwhelmed or maybe she misunderstood what she saw. I even wondered if she was hallucinating from exhaustion. Everyone listened. But when I got there, Talia covered her mouth for a moment, trying to steady herself. When I walked into that office and saw it for myself. She shook her head. It was awful. No one moved. The fear and grief in Talia's voice made it clear that whatever Hillary had discovered was not a simple mistake or misunderstanding. Tate stared at his mother. Mom, he said quietly, what did you see? Talia looked up at him, tears still falling. And for the first time that night, Tate saw something in his mother's expression he had rarely ever seen before.